Um, Hi, good evening. My name is Neha Gurka, and we're just going to be talking about, getting on the e-bandwagon and e-commerce becoming a part of the electronic commerce economy. And it's been a fairly interesting last few days in terms of gathering data. We being tier one city dwellers, we obviously are surrounded by e-commerce. We transact a lot online, but it's been very interesting to gather the data and see what's actually happening in the rest of the country, and present that to you. So what we're basically going to cover today will be broadly three topics. Firstly, we'll touch upon what the e-commerce stage is in India, where we are right now, what the sales figures are looking at, people transacting online. Take a sort of a shallow dive into what are the e-commerce business models that are generally adopted. Maybe we'll give a lowdown on the different types of revenue models as well, such as drop shipping, warehousing, etc. And then finally, I think we'll answer, queries on how we can start an e-commerce business. A fairly simple process, and we hope to lay it out for you. And of course, we'll be happy to take any questions after the session on any of these points or anything else, and maybe even get back to you on email or the WP platform. With any queries or answers that you might require going ahead. First, let's dive into the e-commerce business in India. I think what's really been interesting is, of course, seeing the growth in the market size. It's been significant, from 39 billion to 120 billion. I think Morgan Stanley says this value will probably go up to 200 billion by 2027. I think with the coronavirus pandemic, we might actually reach that figure sooner, because I think if there's one thing we've realized, at least for most of us living in tier one, tier two cities, is that e-commerce and sort of maintaining that social distancing does have its benefits, even in terms of transacting or doing your retail shopping as well. I think one of a few of the other drivers has been, of course, that the mobile phone base is subscriber base has really gone up. Cost of mobile phones has halved between 2011 and 2017, and that, of course, you can see has led to a large number of people actually getting mobile phones. So mobile phone ownership per 100 people has actually gone from 5.5 to 26.2. And of course, you can see that with the fall in tariffs, there's been a 73% fall in data tariffs between 2015 and 2017, and that, of course, has led to data consumption going up. I mean, it's gone up almost 100 times between 2014 and 18. So we definitely have a lot more internet users now. I think India now is ranked number one as far as data consumption is concerned. I think uh, 1 in 5 Indians now is taking on or undertaking, or 1 in 5 internet users in India is undertaking e-commerce transactions now. That number is 3 out of 5 for China and 4 out of 5 for USA. So we have a long way to go, but I think all the enablers are in place for people to adopt more and more online technology. I think. Oops. Um, Sorry about that. Um, I think some of the other points that are definitely interesting to note is the market size for various products. So the average size for goods has gone up from about 20 billion of goods being sold online to about 40 to 45 billion in sales. People are also obviously undertaking transactions such as sales, and of course financial services and digital media as well. Just 1 second while I adjust my screen. I think this will be a lot better. Um, Oops, sorry about that. Um, Right. And, digital media, where what we consider to be, over the top digital streaming platforms such as Netflix and Amazon Prime and so on, and Hotstar, and, so on and so forth, they still account for only about 590 million. But I suspect this number is going to shoot up significantly, especially with our lower data consumption costs. And who knows, this number could zoom ahead, in the years to come. What has really been interesting for me, at least, is to see that, in 2017, we had 60% of the orders coming in from metro and tier one cities. That has fallen to 51%. That's primarily because now, tier two and three, four cities are becoming more and more comfortable in adopting e-commerce, transactions. And interestingly, most of the e-commerce transactions that are happening are still low ticket items, but that's a start. You can see that now with tier two, three, and four cities getting into the act, that number will look more and more skewed towards these smaller towns where majority of India resides. Now, jumping into the business models, this is just to give you a rundown on, what sort of business models are there very quickly. If I could dive into, like B2B is basically one business selling to another business. Of course, I think the examples are IndiaMart and Alibaba. And interestingly, Amazon has also gotten into the act. So a year or two ago, Amazon business has also started targeting other businesses in India. There are, of course, other B2B websites such as Power to SME and Udaan. We, in fact, have accounting clients for whom we do accounting and GST filing, and they run the restaurants. And they are actually sourcing a lot of their raw materials through websites such as Udaan. I think now smaller businesses are waking up to the power of the internet as a sourcing tool as well. And I think a lot and more businesses are going to get into the B2B space as well. B2C, of course, is your standard, Amazon, Flipkarts, Myntra, and all these other websites which are selling directly to the customers. And C2C is, obviously, one customer selling to another. Quicker, OLX, you would even say something like a TripAdvisor could be a C2C website where one consumer is actually providing information that is being consumed by another traveler. And of course, C2B, where you essentially have freelance individuals, smaller businesses, smaller sole proprietors that are now servicing larger businesses. So you have freelancer.in, Fiverr, Upwork, and all these other websites that are enabling smaller outfits, businesses, individuals, to now become vendors, service vendors to larger businesses as well. Of course, e-commerce has been aggressively adopted by the administration as well, by the government. Again, this can be split into two aspects. One is business to administration, and one is obviously customer to administration. Now, when you talk of business to administration, of course, a simple example would be online bidding for tenders, which coal tenders and so on and so forth, which has become hopefully more transparent over the last few years. And of course, when you're paying your taxes online, you are actually indulging in e-commerce, where you are helping the administration gather taxes. So that is essentially C2A, e-commerce. Of course, there are various revenue models as well, that businesses are using to generate business. Now, when I say revenue models, these basically apply mainly to e-commerce businesses selling goods. Of course, there are subscription-based models as well, which we will also be touching upon. Drop shipping, which is very hot. I think, we deal with a lot of e-commerce sellers, as our clients. And we, of course, therefore have had to track the industry. And we do feel that there are a lot of questions raised about drop shipping. Simplistically, drop shipping is where you don't have the ownership of the goods. You basically maintain your website, handle the marketing, handle the branding, get the customers, get the footfalls. And once you get a sale, you actually then get in touch with your vendor to supply directly to the customer. So you are basically not taking ownership of the goods. This of course helps with your cash, with your inventory, and so on and so forth, and has therefore become a very viable tool for people just starting out in e-commerce with very low capital. Of course, the other aspect or counterpoint or corollary to this is that you don't actually have control over your inventory and your customer servicing abilities. So as a business person, as someone who's starting out, you sort of need to take a call on that. White labeling essentially is where you are in touch with wholesale manufacturers, and you once you get an order, you actually get that labeled as your brand, and then you get it sent directly to the customer. This again helps with the inventory, because essentially you may or may not be maintaining the inventory at your end. You definitely aren't manufacturing at your end, so that is one headache, one less headache that you need to take care of. Warehousing is basically the standard inventory-led model, which a lot of businesses traditionally followed when they first started e-commerce, their own websites, e-commerce websites, which is where you stock the goods in your own warehouse, or rented or owned, and as soon as you get an order, you make it a point to supply it to the customer. This of course increases your cash requirements, and you need to maintain the inventory at your end. Therefore, you increases your manpower requirements and other related costs as well. Now, manufacturing is basically where you are now handling the entire chain, right from sourcing of the raw materials to manufacturing, to actually, running the website online, and then, of course, finally getting the goods delivered either directly through your in-house logistics team or through third-party logistics. We'll, of course, cover that a little later. Again, this would require immense amount of cash because you would be involved in every part of the chain. But again, it would also afford you a lot of control over the quality because, again, you would be involved in every part of the chain. And finally, I think there were a few queries regarding, I think when people signed up for this session as well, regarding subscriptions. Frankly, if you, it's very easy now to run a subscription-based business. There are a lot of platforms, which we will again be covering a little later, that help you, run your own website. And within that website, you can even, program, with basic programming, or even with no programming, things like subscriptions, where an automatic reminder for a payment is sent to a customer, but every month or every quarter, and so on and so forth. A basic subscription based model would be what you see as a Netflix or a Hotstar, or or an Amazon Prime payment, where you subscribe to the services for a period of a year or a month, and then it gets renewed at the end of the period. Of course, there are a lot of other subscription based models, such as Coursera and Udemy, where you can actually subscribe to taking various courses online, and so on and so forth. A subscription-based model can be adopted for goods suppliers as well. Where let's say you take subscriptions on a weekly basis or a monthly basis to supply certain groceries, or to supply certain vegetables, and so on and so forth. It has started on a micro economy basis, but I think the idea of course is to scale it up, for a lot of these businesses. I'm just going to run through this very quickly. I think, obviously we are accountants, so we look at, a lot of these, various revenue models in detail, in terms of how it can actually impact an entrepreneur that is just starting out. Of course, drop shipping is a lot easier if you just want to start off right away. The starting cost is low. There is very low inventory risk because you're not maintaining the inventory at your end. And of course, the cash flow impact is positive because you can start off on a very low cash base, and your cash requirements on a monthly basis is also low, because you are not taking ownership of the goods. It also helps you test new products. So in case you are selling, you're selling a particular type of mobile cover, and you want to now explore, let's say selling tempered glass or something else that is also related to, selling mobiles. Instead of buying, 1,000 pieces of the tempered glass and so on and so forth, you can actually just get it drop shipped now. A lot of the drop shipping actually still happens with companies in China. But there are a few homegrown Indian companies that are offering drop shipping as well, and we'd be happy to guide you, or find that information out for you should you choose, post this call. Uh, the flip side, to drop shipping is that, of course, you have very little control over the inventory. So you don't actually know when your vendor is actually running out of this inventory, because he could be supplying the same inventory to other online sellers such as you. So you could get orders for some product and then only realize later, though there are checks and balances in place, but you could only realize later that these goods are in fact not available. And this, of course, also impacts your ability to service your customers effectively. Now, I think coming to the main question, which everyone would want us to answer, is how to start your own e-commerce business. I think I'm very quickly going to run through the 8 steps, and before we get into the details of each step and what really needs to be done in each step, I think firstly you need to choose between going either through a marketplace. Now, when I say marketplace, a marketplace model effectively is something like an Amazon or a Flipkart or a Craftsvilla or a Pepperfry, where you and many other of your competitors are essentially selling on the same platform. And of course, I think there are advantages over there as well. Your own platform could be a website that you have created on your own. Now there are a lot of e-commerce frameworks that are available, where that will help you set up an e-commerce business within a few hours to a few days. That's how easy these some of these platforms are to use. I think it, we will delve into this a little more once we cover all the steps. I think you need to then decide that you need to register your business. Again, you need to choose whether you want to be a sole proprietorship. If you're doing this business with someone, then you also need to ensure that all your other registrations are in place. This could be your Shop and License Act, professional taxes, other tax registrations, and so on and so forth. You need to open your bank account, get your payment gateways integrated. If you have you need to then make your own website or mobile app, or register with the marketplace. So, if you are getting registered with an Ajio or an Amazon or a Flipkart, you need to make sure that you have all those vendor registrations and agreements in place. And if you are running your own website, you need to ensure that you can integrate payment gateways with your website. I know that this particular space has seen a sea change over the last 2 or 3 years, and there's the space continues to evolve. It's a very, very interesting space, the payment gateway space, and of course the logistics space as well. Again, we'll be touching into this. So if you are actually supplying goods, then how are you getting those goods to your customers? What are your options, and which one is best for you? I think we'll be delving into that as well. And of course, finally, the accounting and taxation aspect of it, because a lot of people, when they first start out a business, they are overwhelmed by the compliance requirements, and of course by the operational requirements. And I think once you get a handle on the accounting and the taxation, it will help you smoothen out the operational problems you encounter, because a lot of e-commerce businesses tend to face a lot of inventory and cash problems as they are scaling up. And I think we see it with our e-commerce clients all the time. And it's something that we help them. We are trying to direct them to see and understand and analyze the right metrics in their business, and we will be touching on what those metrics are in point number 8. So very quickly, if you go to point number 1, choosing between the marketplace and your own platform, very very quickly. Of course, it's a lot easier to sign up with a marketplace. I mean, if you want to get onboarded with Amazon, we are actually part of the Amazon service provider network. They will get you onboarded within a week or two. I mean, it is smooth, it is easy, and they will guide you through every step of the place. And of course, they have their own help sections in terms of getting all your registrations and documents in place. And with starting with your own website, of course, there is very little guidance out there. There is a lot more information. It's a lot more tedious gathering that information. um, Traffic, we know that with an Amazon or a Flipkart, you don't need to bother. If someone needs to buy a board game, or if someone needs to buy a smartphone, or if someone needs to buy a printer, they will consider going to Amazon to check out the prices, definitely even before they even go to a retail store. Such as the hold that a lot of these e-commerce websites now have over the average tier 1 customer. So getting traffic is not an issue. I just wanted to point out here that Flipkart and Amazon now account for 70% of the online sales in India. So if you are looking to get on the e-commerce bandwagon, this of course would be a great place to start, just to get a sense of what needs to be done. Of course, when you're running your own website, you need to sort of generate that own traffic. uh, you know um, Having said that, you could possibly adopt a hybrid model as well, where you start selling through Amazon and Flipkart, and of course at the same time make your own website. Maybe get some learnings through your sales done through Amazon and Flipkart before you eventually move to your own website. When you move to your own website, there are a lot of platforms that help you create e-commerce websites. Like I said, within half an hour to possibly within a few days. We will be touching that in point number 5. um, some of the other benefits, of course, are the marketplaces will do the fulfillment for you. Here, if you are running your own website, you need to sort of manage the logistics on your own. Access to competitor products is higher. So if someone is searching for, let's say, books, and you happen to be a book seller, of course, there are various publishing houses and distribution houses that are selling the same book through Amazon, and not to mention Amazon's own, in-house distribution service, which is called Cloudtail. So you are competing against other vendors as well, and that is very evident to the customer when they are on Amazon or Flipkart or Myntra and so on and so forth. Once a customer is on your own website, they obviously don't have access to competitor websites, and if your website is interesting enough, if the UI user interface is good enough, if the pricing is good enough, they may not feel the need to really go check another website, and that might actually help you with your sales, and so on and so forth. Of course, branding is only possible on your website. It is very difficult to get branding for your products on any of these marketplaces. And remarketing efforts can of course be streamlined. So if a customer actually leaves your website midway, because a lot of them don't actually transact the first time they come to your website, remarketing to them through social media tools such as Instagram, Facebook, so on and so forth, might actually be easier if you're running your own website versus an Amazon or a Flipkart and so on and so forth. Now, registering your business, I mean, I think, we had a business 101, a few weeks ago through WEP, and that session by itself was a whole 40 minutes. So, I don't think, of course, we can give that kind of time to this. Of course, when you need to register your business, you need to understand how you want to approach. I think one of the basic things that we need to understand is that, as a private limited company or a limited liability partnership, you definitely have more credibility. You have more credibility with your vendors. You have more credibilities with your credibility with your customers, and so on and so forth. So I think that is a sort of a rule of thumb. Interestingly, I do want to share that when the whole coronavirus crisis first started out, and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs actually asked a lot of companies and LLPs to actually sign a document on how ready they were for coronavirus. or to handle coronavirus in terms of work from home and so on and so forth. And what their reasoning, and they've actually mentioned that in the document, is that in tier 1 cities or in urban areas, a lot of the main employers are basically LLPs and private limited companies. That by far seems to be the most popular option, and it is the most credible option as well. I think when you move to the other registrations as well, I think GST is something that is a significant pain point for a lot of smaller businesses and a lot of proprietors who are first starting out. Again, this could be a big session on its own, but suffice to say that if you are selling goods online, you will need a GST number. If you're providing services online, then you can take a GST number only if your sales cross 20 lakhs. You're of course free to take a GST number before that, but you're not required to till your sales cross 20 lakhs. Another requirement is the shop and establishment license. A lot of banks and payment gateways actually ask you for this if you don't have a GST number. Again, the shop and establishment license requirement differs from state to state. So you actually need to check, what the requirements are in your state. So I'll just give you an example. I think in Maharashtra, you require a shop and establishment license if you're employing 10 people or more. But in Haryana, that number is actually 20. You may not actually need one from day one, but that would depend on which state you are operating out of. And of course, professional tax as well. Professional tax, again, it differs from state to state, and you need to check whether professional tax actually is applicable in your state or not. Point number 4 was opening a bank account, which is fairly simple. I think we've all done that. I don't think we really need to cover that separately on this session. Now, I think another interesting point is about whether how you're going to go about making your own website if you want to actually make your own website. There are a lot of platforms available today versus maybe 10 to 15 years ago. Interestingly, I think if you read the book written by Mr. Mark Randolph, who's the founder of Netflix, he said that when they actually created their website in 1997, it cost them upwards of $1 million. And today you can get a e-commerce website up and running within a few thousand rupees. So that's how far we have come. If you look at something like a Shopify in India, it's powering about 1,100 e-commerce websites. This data is as of July 2019. And of course, we all know that, WordPress actually powers 35% of the internet. So 35% of the websites on the internet are actually powered by WordPress. Magento and BigCommerce, which owns WooCommerce, are the other e-commerce platforms that a lot of customers are actually adopting. With these websites, like I mentioned, you can actually get an e-commerce website up and running within half an hour to a couple of hours to a couple of days. And I was actually speaking with a digital marketer once who said that with Shopify you can actually create a website as complicated or as vast as Amazon. Of course, I don't know that. I'm not an expert in that area, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that, but that's how good some of these platforms actually are. Coming to registering with a marketplace, we all know that some of the top marketplaces where you can actually sell products are, of course, Amazon, Flipkart, Paytm Mall, Craftsvilla, Pepperfry, so on and so forth. When you need to look at the legalities of a marketplace, you need to consider the vendor agreements, the intellectual property, especially if you're manufacturing your own products and so on and so forth. And of course, the registrations that are required. So for example, you can't actually sign up with Amazon till you have a GST registration in place and so on and so forth. So you need to figure that out. All these marketplaces have helped you out immensely with the documentation, so there shouldn't be any problem there. And of course, you can always go back to a CA or accounting services provider that can help you, get all your compliances in order. Now, I think once you have your website up and running, you're done with the beta testing and so on and so forth. You actually need to then think of, payment gateway integration. I think another startling statistic is that the number of cashless transactions have just shot up They've gone almost 9x between 2014 and 2018. So people are obviously more, comfortable, undertaking digital transactions. I think if you look at UPI, Unified Payments Interface, I think when you read various, articles and, just type UPI on Google and you're going to get some fantastic information. You actually realize that the UPI payment, model is actually now being, thought of being adopted globally, because payment options in India have grown manifold, and in no small part because of UPI. I mean, in Jan 2020, I think there were about 1.3 billion transactions recorded through UPI. And I think the value of those transactions was close to about 31 billion. Paytm is handling about 400 million, transactions a month. And, if you tie this in with our general aversion to, paying cash on delivery, and you see that, now people are becoming more and more comfortable, prepaying online, through a debit card, through a credit card, it's fantastic. It really helps you with your cash cycle. On average, if you are, if you're running your own website and you are delivering the goods to the customer, and then the courier company is picking up that cash on your behalf and then depositing in your bank account, that cash cycle normally takes about 10 to 15 days. Whereas now, with online payments, you actually get prepaid. Even before you dispatch the goods, and the money is actually in your bank account within 3 to 4 days. That's how soon the settlement happens. Just to point out some of the large payment gateway service providers in India, is of course Razorpay, PayUmoney, PayPal, Stripe, and of course Paytm as well. We've already covered Paytm as Paytm Mall, so I thought I'll leave that out over here. And of course, there would be some documentation required. Again, like I mentioned, while getting onboarded with a marketplace, as with and also with a payment gateway, they help you out immensely with the payment, with the documentation and so on and so forth. Whether PayUmoney or Razorpay, they are fairly decent with their response times as well. Now, when you talk of e-commerce logistics, or actually getting the goods to the customer, e-commerce has got, logistics has got to be one of the major drivers and one of the most integral parts of running an e-commerce business. I mean, I think in India, we are expecting almost 2 billion in investments, in 2020, just for logistics and warehousing. And let me tell you, this space has also gone through massive change over the last 4 to 5 years. So, of course, you have, Flipkart, and Amazon, that have their own in-house logistics arms, such as eCart and so on and so forth. You obviously have the traditional logistics service providers, such as, DHL, Blue Dart, Warehouse, so on and so forth, DHL, Blue Dart, FedEx, and so on and so forth. And what has happened of late is the e-commerce logistics service providers, which are basically logistics aggregators, and their focus, they may be aggregating other service providers, or they may be undertaking the services on their own. And this particular segment has actually captured 28% of the logistics for e-commerce businesses. This data is, of course, as of 2018, and it's going through a sea change. I mean, when you talk of delivery or Vama Ship or ShipRocket, most of our clients are handling or dealing with at least one of these companies, because the traditional service providers do not have the same kind of technological interface, and they're not updating the information as fast as the e-commerce service providers are, or e-commerce logistics service providers are. Once again, though, this area still remains really, really underserviced. I mean, when you look at the data, out of 100,000 pin codes in our country, only 15 to 20,000 pin codes are actually serviced as of now. This number may have got gone up. I would say, even if it's doubled, in the last 2 years, that's still only 40% of the pin codes that are being serviced in the country. So there is immense, immense potential over here as well. Warehousing is another aspect. I mean, for those people who are looking, at their own, at stocking their own goods, and then obviously servicing the customer. Warehousing is expected to see almost 100% growth between 2018 and 2020. Amazon is now thinking of setting up close to 50 warehouses within the country. In the next few months or years. I don't have those figures on me, but they're setting up close to 50 warehouses. And now I think we come to the final aspect. You have your website ready, you have the payment gateway, you have the logistics service provider set up, and now you're ready. You know where you're getting your goods from, you know whether you're adopting the drop shipping model, you know whether you are adopting a subscription model. You also know, where, what your warehousing is. Are you adopting a warehousing model, so on and so forth. But I think there are still compliances, and that always seems to be an opaque area, for a lot of businesses out there. So I think, if you break down, the financial aspects into two, broadly speaking, one would be the compliance aspect, which would again be covered by the goods and services tax, and of course a little bit by the TDS and the TCS, which is tax deducted at source and tax collected at source. And the financial aspect again would be covered largely by accounting, because I think again, we say this all the time: if you have your data in order, then you can sit and analyze your data and figure out what are the operational metrics that are important for your business, analyze that, and then work on that. So till you're not recording that data correctly, you're not being able to do anything else, which is where accounting then becomes a base requirement for your business. So let's delve into the goods and services tax first. I think you need to understand what sort of products or services that you're dealing in. Once you know that, you need to figure out the HSN or the SAC code related to those products. That's available on the GST website. That will then tell you what the rates are, actually the GST rates that are applicable on the goods or the services that you're providing. And once you know the place of supply, so if you are supplying, outside your state, then you will have to charge an IGST, and of course, if you're supplying within the state, you will have to charge an SGST or a CGST. Correct invoicing becomes very, very important. I think some of the pointers for correct invoicing are basically, getting the dates correct, the GST rates correct. GST rates correct are not only determined by the HSN codes. Of course, the HSN codes tell you what the GST rates are, but your freight charges, your packing charges are also dependent on the GST rates that are applicable on the goods you sell, which I think a lot of smaller businesses are not aware of. So get in touch with a CA or an accountant who can guide you on that, and make sure that your invoicing is 100% correct. You of course need to quote a GST number as well as a registered GST address in the invoice. And if you are supplying goods over 50,000 rupees, then you will need to generate an e-way bill, and those details also need to be mentioned in the invoice as well. Of course, I think if you are, going the marketplace way and you are going to sign up as a vendor on, Amazon or Flipkart and so on and so forth, you need to understand that, tax is collected at source. That means for all the sales you make, Amazon or Flipkart will deduct 1% as TCS. And very recently in the budget as well, there was an announcement that the same marketplace businesses such as Amazon, Flipkart, and so on and so forth need to deduct a TDS, a tax deducted at source as well for your sales. This, of course, is being appealed by the e-commerce companies, and we'll see how this evolves. This isn't a law yet, but it is a work in progress. I think when you come to the accounting for e-commerce, this is a very, very important area. The reason I say this is because we have a few e-commerce clients, and your cash cycle can get out of whack so fast in an e-commerce business. It is almost frightening. So till you don't have a control over your numbers, you will not know, where the operational problem is. So, firstly, you need to understand where you should be doing your accounting. There are a lot of, cloud accounting softwares out there. We, of course, use a lot of Zoho Books and QuickBooks for our clients. But there's, also things like Logic ERP and so on and so forth that help you, maintain your data online. And the other advantages with a lot of these cloud accounting softwares is that they have integrations. Of them might actually be integrated with Amazon directly, or with Flipkart directly, or they may be integrated with your payment gateways directly. So for example, QuickBooks is integrated with Razorpay. So if you have payments, coming in through Razorpay, that automatically gets linked with your QuickBooks. That leads to, better reconciliation. So you know that anything that is coming through your Razorpay is automatically getting accounted for in your accounting software, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the desktop softwares don't actually have these integrations, and therefore it becomes really important, because then it becomes more tedious actually, because you need an accountant who will then need to double check everything. Inventory management again is a is a huge problem. I think you need to continuously maintain your inventory. We have a client who's just started selling almost just 2 or 3 months ago. And we of course know that because of the lockdown, a lot of the e-commerce sellers are not doing any business right now. And despite that, with just 2 months of business, we have just undertaken our accounting, and we are already having problems, doing the inventory reconciliation. So this client now cannot remember, where all the inventory has gone, whether she has actually sold it or whether it's actually shrinkage, and so on and so forth. This of course is then going to impact her cash flows in the long run. I think another thing that we really need to, pay attention to as e-commerce sellers is cash flows. Your cash cycle is impacted by the inventory model you adopt. So warehousing versus drop shipping, the payment modes you undertake. So COD versus payment gateway integrations, where your customers might be willing to prepay you, and of course the logistics service providers, because this becomes really essential because a lot of the logistics service providers, if they are not being able to service your customers well, if the goods that are getting shipped are then getting returned, there's obviously a chance that the customer will not come back to you to buy those goods, because he's not been serviced properly. And secondly, a lot of those goods can actually get damaged in transit as well. Again, this is going to impact your cash flow as well. And I think you need to understand payments, and reconcile your payments as well. This becomes very important, especially when you have logistics service providers, third party logistics service providers that you're dealing with, especially if you have a lot of COD payments, because as an e-commerce business, you could be doing 100 sales a day, tens and 20 units of sales every day. And, after a certain point, you will lose track on, where the shipments have gone, when the payments have come, what the payment cycle is. It's very important to keep a handle on the payment reconciliation and make sure that you know when the cash is actually coming in, and what the cash cycle actually is. And of course, lastly, a point that is not mentioned here is unit, understanding the unit costs. What is your break even? What is the cost of actually, buying one unit, and what is the cost of actually selling that unit, and what is your actual sales price on that one unit? I think you sort of need to understand these things, or at least have a handle of these things. Maybe you cannot answer these questions. Maybe your operational costs are too high, but at least if you know that, at least knowing the problem is at least halfway through to solving the problem. I think these are a few thoughts that we wanted to leave you with. Of course, we'd be happy to take questions now, if there are any, in terms of how people want to go about joining the e-bandwagon. Do we have any questions? We'd be happy to have any follow-up questions as well, if there are any follow-up questions. If there are any follow-up questions, that would be great. Okay, we'll be sharing this infographic on WEP as mentioned. I think we'll be happy to, or we'll be able to upload this maybe tomorrow or on Monday. And of course, through the WEP platform, we're very active on the WEP platform. If there are any questions or follow-up queries, please feel free to add it in the community over there, or to raise it in any of the forums over there. We actively scour through a lot of the queries that are raised and try and address them. And of course, you can also go on the, I've mentioned the WEP here. The WEP is very active on Facebook as well. You can reach out to WEP on Facebook and raise some questions over there, and you can let them know that on e-commerce, and they will be more than happy to then coordinate with us and get those answers for you. With that, I think we're done for today, I suppose, if there are no questions. Like I said multiple times, you're free to email us, you're free to get on the WEP platform and raise your queries there, and we'll be happy to answer any follow-up questions that are there. Yashodhara, do you want to add anything?
No, I think just that this infographic will be available. Some of you have reached out to us to email you the Business 101 link on the WEP platform, and that we will be doing that on your emails. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us either on the Facebook page of WEP or on the platform, or just connect with us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for being here today.